everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra the TBR0 and my goal is to lessen my physical TBR one book at a time. Today I'm going to be providing you 15 middle grade mysteries that you just might want to try. Before we get into those 15 books, I do want to thank everyone who has recently subscribed to my channel. Not long ago I talked about how close we were to 1,500 subscribers, and at least today of recording I hit it, and I am so excited. I was on Brittany Loves Reading Sprints when we kind of all discussed it, and people in the comments and on screen were really kind and lovely and supportive and congratulated me, and it was really nice. So just so you know, if by the time you watch this video when it's posted, I am not at 1,500 anymore because subscriptions fluctuate, people decide to join and then not join a community, and that's totally fine, that's their choice. I wanted to mark the occasion and know that at one point I did hit 1,500 and I'm really grateful for it. If you, by the end of this video, find yourself really enjoying my content, enjoying my company, and you think you might want to join the community as well, then consider subscribing because you might have just about 1,500 potential friends in your future. Without further ado though, let's get into the 15 middle grade mysteries I want to talk about today. And the reason why I'm talking about them in general is because it is February right now recording, but in March we've got 2 readathons that people are getting really excited for that fit these categories. We have Middle Grade March, which is hosted by Krista from Books and Jams. We also have March Mystery of Madness, if I have the name correct, and of course that is mystery focused, and there are quite a few creators / co-hosts this year for that. If you're interested in participating in either of these readathons, I'll make sure to have the announcement videos below or any other type of material that I can find that can support you in participating to the best of your ability. I have a pretty eclectic list, I would like to say, once we get into these 15 books. I have genre blends, historical fiction, contemporary, those that involve a bit more creepy, scary vibes, and then some that are a bit more wholesome and thoughtful and just kind of want to spread joy in the world. So it's going to be great. I think that there is going to be a middle grade mystery for everyone in this list, and I'm really looking forward to talking about them. I will admit that some of them I actually haven't read myself, but they are on my list to read in the next month or so, so I'm really looking forward to it. And on that note, if there is a mystery that I mention that reminds you of your own middle grade mystery favorites, please be sure to comment them below, because as I'm giving you my own recommendations, I would love to gain some in return. So yeah, thanks for that in advance. Alright, relying on my handy dandy notebook, I have quite a few hybrid mysteries for you. And by hybrid, I mean genre blends. So one of the genres that is focused within these books is mystery, but they also might include science fiction, fantasy, adventure, maybe gothic, supernatural, or horror. As I said, there is quite an eclectic list here, and I'm really proud of it. So the first hybrid I'm going to talk about is Trex by Christyne Morrell. Now this is the first time I ever tried this author. She has published books before, but this is the first time she's really published a middle grade that involves science fiction, and I think it was done really well. So this was published in 2022. It was an ARC when I received it, and I had so much fun with the main characters. It follows Trex and Melly. Now both of these characters are experiencing kind of a feeling of being lost in the world, of not having their place. They just want to feel accepted. They want to be surrounded by community and friends and feel like they belong somewhere, and that they are being appreciated, that they can give some type of value to those around them. And I really appreciated that message throughout. Trex, he and his mother have been moving all around the country since he can really remember, and that's because they are on the run from someone called The Company. Now, this company ended up saving Trex's life when he was younger. He got a brain transplant, which is part of the science fiction element here, and it's a very experimental type of surgery that was also expensive and a bit of an investment on the company's part, and they view Trex as their property. Trex and his mother disagree, and so they're running around. Every time they feel that the company is getting close to them, they pack up and move, and at this point Trex is so tired of moving. The last thing he wants to do is start over. He just wants to fit in. He wants to experience school and friends, maybe join a sport, but unfortunately it makes it really hard for him because his brain transplant gave him certain abilities that makes it really hard for him to blend in, and he just wants to have a normal life, and it's not letting him, which adds to the very interesting element of this mystery. Now Melly brings in the mystery vibes because all she wants to do is become a detective. She's very awkward, she experiences anxiety in social situations, and oftentimes people bully her for it. She's viewed as an outcast at school, so she too just wants to have friends, just wants to have a community. And so she's our Sherlock Holmes of the group, and she's very observational. Her POV is very different from Trex, and that's another element I really love about this book, is that it is multiple POVs. So there's just a lot to appreciate. There's found family / found friendship. There's some quirky humor, some good dialogue back and forth. Trex and Melly start off on the wrong foot, and then they slowly gain trust, gain friendship, which we really love. And yeah, I really loved how fun but also serious this book was about, like, these children trying to find their place. Book 2 is another book that I absolutely love, and it's part of a series that I cannot talk enough about. I'm sorry to those who've been subscribers for a while. You're gonna have to hear me talk about it one more time, probably not the last time, and that is Bright Storm by Vashti Hardy. This is the first book in the Bright Storm Chronicles. It follows these twin explorers, and I have read the first 3 books in the series. I thought it was only gonna be a trilogy, and I was very happily surprised to learn that there are more adventures for these two, and I can't wait for it. But book 2 is Dark Whispers, book 3 is Fire Song, yes, Fire Song, and the 4th book, it looks like it's going in a different direction. So I'm really intrigued to see what the vibe's gonna be, if it's gonna be similar or not, but it's apparently called Serpent of the Sands, and it seems like it might be a slight spin-off, different directions for these characters, and yeah, I'll keep you posted, but I think it's gonna come out in the next year or two based on like US publication dates. Now, this first book came out in 2018, and it is a blend of so many different genres. So not only is it a bit of an alternate history, sci-fi / fantasy / adventure, steampunk, but it also does have mystery elements, and I'm going to defend it. I promise you that there is a mystery in this story. So it does follow twins, as I mentioned. They are Arthur and Maudie Brightstorm. Now, they have grown up, born and raised to want to be explorers, to explore the world, because we are in a bit of an alternate exploration age. We aren't in the world as we see it now. There are different names, different places in this continent that they live in, and it does provide a very interesting perspective, especially because when we're thinking about exploration, we're probably going to assume it's going to be a historical fiction, and it's just, there's not much newness to it, especially because nowadays we're still realizing the effects that we had on exploration, the harm that was done to the world, to certain cultures and people, and I believe Vashti Hardy's providing a very interesting spin on it to provide social commentary on the climate, on environmentalism, preservation of others' cultures, of the flora and the fauna that you interact with when you're exploring the world, doing it ethically when you're traveling too, because these characters do travel in a very interesting way. They use airships, so they don't use the old fangled boat on the water type of situation. They actually use ships that fly across the air, and they do happen to use coal, which is a part of this discussion, and I think Vashti Hardy does it really well. But back to Arthur and Maudie. Now, these twins, their father is a new explorer. He is very well respected and well loved in the community, except by those old families who've been exploring for generations, and they don't like seeing new blood in their ranks. So there's this competition, their father goes off to participate in it, and he doesn't return. And Arthur and Maudie suddenly find themselves being orphans. They are evicted from their home, and they just want to figure out what happened to their father, because there's no way that he is missing because of a mistake on his part. So they find a way to join a crew and basically travel following his route in order to find him. So that's where the mystery element comes in, and it's such a great series. There's also disability rep, because Arthur was born with only one arm, and so you see that and how he overcomes it, and it's very normalized. I really love this series. Okay, so book number 3 in the hybrid section is No One Leaves the Castle by Christopher Healy. Now, this book I just read in the last year. It came out in 2023. I was lucky to have an ARC, and I am still obsessed with it. It was one of my favorite books of 2023. It is a fantasy mystery blend, and it does follow 2 characters that I would go to the ends of the earth for, the Lilac and Dulcinea. Now, the Lilac is an aspiring bounty hunter. She's still trying to prove herself in the world because she is a child, arguably she's 12 or 13, and then Dulcinea is kind of her sidekick, but also an aspiring bard. So both of them come from past that they're trying to get away from, that they're trying to kind of start afresh, and so they find each other, and they do have a rocky start. They have to lie about how great they are to really get anyone to hire them, and then they find themselves at this castle, and rather than trying to find some stolen heirloom, they find themselves in the middle of a mystery because someone in the castle is murdered. They physically cannot leave the premises until the murder is solved. And so now our aspiring bounty hunter, the Lilac, has to become a detective, and her bard becomes a bit of her sidekick situation, Watson. And I loved it. I thought there was a good balance of fantastical elements, of magic, of fantastical creatures on staff, with this idea of a detective searching the castle for clues and red herrings and everything else, investigating suspects. I really loved the banter. The dialogue was very self-referential and recognized how funny and, I don't know, kind of weird it was, and being a mystery set in this castle, and it was such a great time. I definitely recommend it, as I've said probably for every single book so far. The fourth book is The Hatmakers by Tamsin Merchant. Now, this hybrid is another mixture of fantasy and mystery, but it's also historical fiction. It's in a bit of an alternate history London, and I really love how well it blends so many plot devices together. So this is part of the Cordelia Hatmaker series, and there is a third book supposed to be published, but so far only 2 have been published, and I've only read one of them. So I read The Hatmakers, I am meaning to read The Mapmakers, and an expected release is for The Troublemakers, and I'm really looking forward to it, even though I haven't read book 2 yet. It's fine. So The Hatmakers came out in 2021, and our main character, as the series name suggests, is Cordelia Hatmaker. Her family is able to basically create hats very methodically with certain ingredients that provide abilities or emotions or behaviors onto the wearer. So maybe the wearer is lacking in confidence, or maybe they are having anger issues and they need to bring peace. They need to focus because they're feeling scattered. Certain ingredients on a hat can provide this to them. And the hat makers are the only creators in this world who can do that. There's the cloak makers, the watch makers, I believe there's the cane makers and the shoe makers. There's quite a few makers. And of course, all of them don't get along because they've got bad blood. There is some history among the families that make them enemies, but they all work for royalty and for the public to help them with various issues that they have. But they have to be careful because there are also some dangerous products, some dangerous elements or ingredients that can be applied to this clothing that can have dire circumstances. So it's an art that you have to be trained in. And Cordelia is really raring to go. She wants to be trained so badly, but she's the youngest hat maker, and they're like, you're not ready yet. You can't make your own hat. The mystery comes in because there's 2 mysteries actually. One is that her father goes missing. He's meant to be on this ship that's returning with a very rare ingredient. During a storm, his ship crashes into the pier and he is not found. There's a supposition that he is dead along with a lot of other people on the ship, but Cordelia is certain that he's alive, that they need to find him. And so throughout the book, she's trying to convince someone, anyone, her family, someone else, to help her find her father. Meanwhile, there is war brewing. There are issues going on in the royal family, in the kingdom, and Cordelia is at first not really aware of it, but with every passing chapter, she's realizing that something sinister is going on and someone wants England to go to war with France. So there's something going on there, and it all just ties in really nicely. So I definitely recommend it if you like adventure of various means with a little bit of magic. The 5th book that I'm going to recommend is one that I actually recently read in the last couple of days, and I'm so glad I did because it probably would have been on a list with books I haven't read yet, but I'm looking forward to. But I'm really glad I read it because it adds a certain texture, some elements within this list that actually would have been lacking, and I didn't even know that they were in this book until I read it. So Deephaven by Ethan M. Aldridge is the first in a new series, the Deephaven Mystery Series. Apparently the 2nd book comes out in September 2024, at least in the US, and it's going to be called Scrimshaw. So interesting, gotta look forward to it. And the reason why it's in the hybrid section is because it is gothic horror mystery. It's set in this very dark, creepy boarding school that holds so many secrets, and our detective, our main character, is Nev Tallow. Now this is a non-binary main character too, which is so lovely to see, in addition to the fact that it's horror, supernatural, another element I was missing from this list. And I really appreciated Nev. Nev is a go-getter, Nev is determined, and has come from poverty, has come from strife and issues with family, and kind of considers themselves an orphan at this point, but they get this mysterious scholarship, fully paid tuition to this boarding school, and they're like, okay, well, I've got nothing else to lose, so I'm just gonna go. And they realize that this boarding school has so many secrets. As they're getting to know new friends, find their own place in this community, there is also this dark entity that is in another part of the school that no one's allowed to go to. It is off limits, and yet, of course, Nev finds themselves and others drawn to it, being forced into the halls, and they come face to face with a creature that can genuinely cause harm to them. I really loved how much was on the line and how many kind of supernatural, magical, like dark magic elements were put into this. And I also really liked that Nev being a non-binary character, that wasn't ever part of the conflict or part of a discussion among the characters. They just completely accepted that Nev was non-binary and proceeded there, and it was very natural and normal, and I loved it. My final genre blend mystery on this middle grade list is Ophi's Ghosts by Justina Ireland. I read this a few years ago, and I still think about it all the time. I still recommend it all the time. Now, Justina Ireland is also the author of Dread Nation. I'm pretty sure to date Ophi's Ghosts is her only middle grade publication. I could be wrong, but I know that it was not something that was expected to be in her wheelhouse, but it was done so well. So this is historical fiction mystery, but the reason why it's a part of the genre blend section is because it's paranormal. So it originally came out in 2021, and our main character is Ophelia Harrison, aka Ophi, our titular character. She and her mother end up moving very quickly from Georgia to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for some serious reasons. There are content warnings in this, so you might want to make sure that if you're reading this, if you're going to be recommending it to someone else, that they're aware of it. And it does involve racial violence, racism, prejudice, discrimination, because it is set in November 1922 where it starts, and that is pre-civil rights movement, and Ophi herself as a young child experiences a lot of things quite early on. For instance, Ophi can see ghosts. She learns this when she sees her first ghost, who happens to be her father. Her father is a victim of racial violence, and she sees her father only when he comes to her and her mother and tells Ophi, you need to leave right now. People are coming to our home and you need to find safety. So they run from their home, and if I remember correctly, I believe the home is burned. And so they take a train up north, and her mom and she must basically become employees at this manor, at Daffodil Manor, and Ophi soon realizes that it is riddled with ghosts. Ghosts are everywhere within the house, and they all have different reasons for sticking around, having unfinished business, and one in particular has some dark, sinister reason, some unfinished business that Ophi has to resolve for everyone's safety. I really did appreciate this novel, and I thought it was really interesting, being historical fiction and involving paranormal activity, and it ended very nicely. I was really impressed that this is a middle grade, and I think so many people would really enjoy it. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to another section. It only involves 2 books, and that is the thriller mysteries. The first one I'll talk about is The Night Raven by Johan Rundberg. Now, this is a translation from the original Swedish. It originally came out in 2021, but it was translated just in 2023 by AA Prime, and this one was really fascinating for me. As I said, it is mystery thriller, but it's also historical fiction. It's set in Stockholm in the 1880s, and it follows an orphan who has to figure out what's going on in her city because it seems as though a serial killer is on the loose. That serial killer, who was supposedly executed the year before, or a few years before, and everyone's thinking, what's going on? Why is there a similar MO that's happening with these other bodies? And it was really interesting. It's also far darker than most middle grade mysteries that I've read, so just keep that in mind. I do attribute that to the fact that Johan Rundberg is a Swedish author. I feel as though Nordic mysteries, including adult versions, are much darker than anything else that I've read when it comes to books that are translated from other countries or that, are published and set in the United States or in the UK. So just keep that in mind. As I said, our main character is an orphan. Her name is Mika, but she works side by side with a detective because of circumstances kind of forcing them to, Detective Hoff, and that's where we get the series title. At least in the Swedish original books, it's called the Manvind and Hoff series, But when it's translated, interestingly, we drop the Hoff, and the American version of this series is just called The Moonwind Mysteries, so just a direct translation from Mika's last name. So that was kind of interesting for me, just as someone who likes language. This was really fascinating, being set in the 1880s, because it's also set in a very cold, horrific winter where people are rationing food. There is heavy industrialization, so we're talking about child labor, as well as just regular labor laws that aren't really protecting the citizens. And I really appreciated the commentary on that, and how Mika herself, being so young, still has to recognize that if she were to go missing one day, how many people would actually care? How many people would realize it? Would justice be served to protect her, to save her, to find her? And she does have to grapple with the fact that no, she probably wouldn't be cared about by too many people beyond those that she has found as her family at the orphanage. So yeah, it was an interesting book for sure. The next thriller mystery that I want to talk about is called The Keeper. Now, this is by Guadalupe Garcia McCall. It was published back in 2022, and I just had such a ball with it. It is inspired by the true story of the Westfield Watcher, if you're a fan of that. I'm sure a lot of us at this point have heard of The Watcher, but if you haven't, I highly recommend you check it out. There have been a lot of kind of like video documentaries on YouTube discussing it, and so it is fascinating, but also very eerie. And I hadn't even really thought about that until I started re-looking at this title, and I was like, you're right, this is 100% inspired by that. There are some kind of very creepy, interesting events that go on where our two main characters, James and Ava, they are siblings, James being the older sibling and Ava being younger. They have a bit of a rivalry. They don't get along super well because they prank each other all the time, and one always has to up the other, which adds to the whole atmosphere of the book, because as they keep pranking each other, their parents stop believing them when they start saying the strange things are happening, because they're like, now you're trying to prank us, we're done with it, we're tired. And James and Ava are like, no, we're being serious. So I remember that moment of almost like the boy who cried wolf kind of situation, where they're like, you've done this too many times, now we don't believe you, and this is the moment they're meant to. But one element that James and Ava have to cope with is that their family moves from Texas to Oregon, which is very different from them, starting a new life, starting in a new neighborhood, on top of the fact that their grandmother recently died. And so they're also coping with that, especially James, who is kind of our main POV that we follow, on top of the fact that James is starting to get letters. He's finding notes in strange places, and they're being signed The Keeper. So he knows he's being watched, and it adds this very kind of sinister, weird feeling of him not really knowing his surroundings, being in a new neighborhood, and then not knowing who's watching him at any point. And his sister also becomes in danger, and it's just, I recommend it. It was fun. All right, so I only have 3 more titles on this list that I have read that I want to talk about, and they fall under kind of categories of classic / general historical fiction novels. The first one is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. Come on, you knew I was going to talk about this one. It is a classic, and it was published back in 1978, so it's coming close. It's a few years shy of its 50th anniversary. That is insane to me. I remember I read it back in middle school for a class, actually, and I have reread it since. It was a handful of years ago at this point, and it still stood. I think that this is a really fun mystery that people can enjoy at middle grade age and up. I really love the characters. It's a full cast, and it's a very short novel too, which is pretty impressive. It follows a murder mystery surrounding this eccentric, game-loving, rich millionaire man named Samuel W. Westing. Now, he lives up on the hill at this mansion. No one's heard of him for years, and then suddenly smoke begins to come from the house, and people down below, especially at this kind of apartment building complex, are like, what's going on up there? Is he back? And then they realize that he's been murdered, and 16 people have all been chosen. They've been invited to join in this game. And of course, Samuel Westing, being a game lover, challenges them in his will to solve his murder. And whoever solves his murder actually wins his fortune. And it's really fun. We do have a middle grade age main character, Turtle, but we also have this huge range of ages from elderly to young adult age and all throughout. And you just don't see that very often in middle grade, especially nowadays. I feel as though oftentimes there's just kind of this small group of middle grade age people, and then we might get like a cameo of adults. But I feel as though Ellen Raskin, and she's not the only one on this list, but she provides a good balance of just saying, hey, just because you are maybe 10 to 12 years old, you can read characters who are adults, who are young adult, mixing in and engaging, especially in this mystery, which is very complicated in like a really fun way. Book number 9 on this list is Safi's Angel by Hilary McKay. Now this came out in 2001, and it is a part of a series that my friend who had recommended the book to me originally hadn't even realized. She'd read book 1 when she was a child, really loved it, and then called it quits. And then both of us, when she recommended it to me as an adult, we both realized that it's actually a series of 5 books, and it follows the various siblings, to my understanding, in this family, the Casson family. Each one of them is named after a color, which is very cute because if I remember correctly, the mother is an artist. And this time, Safi, named after the color saffron, she ends up realizing that she's been adopted. Her mother's twin sister is actually her birth mother, and she had already passed. And so Safi's really grappling with some new things in her life. This is deemed contemporary fiction, and it's definitely not deemed a mystery, but there is a mystery element to it, which is why I'm making it on this list. So like I said, I'm defending every single book on here. I'm counting them that they've got mystery elements. So in my book, they count as mysteries. So Safi, she ends up learning that her grandfather, he had passed away recently, and he says in, I believe it was like a note to Safi or passed it along to Safi's adoptive mother / aunt, that Safi's angel, which was gifted to her by her mother, I believe when she was a baby, is kept in Siena. That's where her grandfather was living at the time. And no one really knows what her angel is, what the identity of it is. It a person? Is it an object? Can it be carried? Is it this huge place? Like, what is it? But whatever it is, her grandfather, when he passed, said that it is still there. It's being kept safe in Siena. And so Safi, of course, wants to go find her angel. The last thing that she has a connection to her birth mother and her grandfather. But that would be very difficult because she lives in the UK. And to travel to Siena, Italy on a whim is just not possible. And circumstances find their way into making it possible for her, but she does have to do a little bit of conniving, a little bit of sneaking around, and join the vacation of another family in very weird circumstances. It's been years since I read it, but I remember it being very wholesome and very quirky and hilarious. And she finds herself in Siena, and now she's searching for the angel. And so that's kind of the mystery that this book involves. And finally, before we get into the books that I haven't actually read yet that I'm really looking forward to, we have The Ghost of Blackwood Hall. This is the 25th book in the Nancy Drew series, and the only reason why I have it on here is because it's the only Nancy Drew book I've ever read. I remember I ended up getting it gifted to me, and so I read it, and I thought it was fine. I thought it was fun, especially for something that was published in the 1940s. I think it was 1948. So, I mean, it's a great prototype for middle grade mystery, so I had to include it on this list. With that said, I will say that there are some archaic language in here, and I should warn you that with Ellen Raskin, that's the same. For Raskin, there are some off-color depictions of one person within the group of 16 who has certain, I suppose, language, certain viewpoints, stereotypes that she relies on with the Asian family that's in that book. By the end, she seems to learn her lesson and befriends the family, befriends one of the parents, and it all works out, but it's kind of one of those things where you're like, couldn't we've just not had this? So just keep that in mind. It's something that's really frustrating every time I do read The Westing Game. I'm like, this is very annoying that that's in there. But anywho, now with the Nancy Drew books, I know that a lot of people have complained about the fat phobia that is depicted in it. So make sure you know for yourself if you're willing to read it or not. And that's probably why I haven't really been interested in continuing Nancy Drew, if I'm going to be honest, because who has time for it? But if people have recommendations, I'm willing to try it. I just was like, I like the number 15, and so I really wanted to make sure I had 15 middle grade mysteries on this list, if I'm going to be honest, and so that's why it's on here. But anyway, so this book follows Nancy Drew and her friends, and they're really looking into the mysterious circumstances surrounding a few people who have been manipulated or affected by spirits. And the question is, are these spirits real or not? It's very much Scooby-Doo-esque, and I will say I did enjoy that element. It was very fun and kind of just quirky in them being like, let's find some clues. And the parents in this book are very supportive of Nancy and her friends being like young adults trying to solve a crime, and you don't see that very often. So there is some merit to this classic mystery, and I understand where middle grade mystery was able to kind of bounce off the shoulders and reach greater, more inclusive, diverse heights. But Yeah, I would have to be convinced to read more Nancy Drew anytime soon, but I had to include it on the list because we have a well-rounded list here, might as well. Okay, we're so close to the end. I only have 4 more books to talk about, and there are 4 books that I haven't read myself. I either own them or I have access to them through NetGalley, and I just want to highlight them because I'm excited, and if you've read them, you can let me know if it's worth it or not to read them. So the first one is Murder Most Ladylike by Robin Stevens. This is a part of a series that is fully complete. It has 9 books in the original series, and then there are a few like 0.5s, like 6.5 and 8.5 sprinkled throughout. And it is a historical fiction mystery. The first book is set in 1934 England. I'm not sure if the children age appropriately with the publication dates or not. That'd have to be something I would experience myself. The original pub date is 2014 though. So as you can see, it makes sense with all the books being published that yeah, it would be published quite a while ago, almost 10 years ago. Congratulations to Robin Stevens for a 10-year anniversary. That's amazing. And the main characters are a double-act schoolgirl detective team. We love to see it. And that includes Daisy Wells and Hazel Wong. It is described as an Agatha Christie style mystery, which I do appreciate. I also believe it, just based on the premise alone. This is very interestingly set at the school itself because a science mistress is murdered, and of course these 2 girls have to figure out what happened. I do own the 2 books, the first 2 books in the series myself, so I actually could start them at any time. I haven't for some reason. 13th on this list is The Improbable Tales of Baskerville Hall by Ali Standish. Now this is one that I did get as a NetGalley ARC last year, so it was published in 2023. I just haven't gotten to it. It's another historical fiction mystery set in, I would say, the 19th century, especially because the main character is Arthur Conan Doyle. Yes, the author who is known for creating Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson and their various mystery adventures. He is a child protagonist, and he attends this secret school of extraordinary gifted children. Are we surprised? And Arthur is someone who comes from poverty. He sees this opportunity to go to this school to raise his family, to lift them from poverty, which is a really interesting angle that I didn't expect. But at the same time, he happens to have enemies at the school apparently, and their main goal is to expel him. So there is some type of kind of conflict going on there as he is solving some mystery and various challenges that are in his way. I am looking forward to it. I was meaning to read it in February as a part of my TBR, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get to it. If not, I'll try to read it in March for middle grade March. The 14th book on this list is one that I'm currently reading, and I am enjoying it so far. It's The Highland Falcon Thief. This is a part of the Adventures on Train series. There are 6 so far, and I really want to get into it because I've heard so many good things. I also have the 4th book on NetGalley, and that is Danger at Dead Man's Pass. So I do have to kind of read the first 3, at least in my mind, before I can read the 4th one. This is by a duo of writers, which I really love. I think that's the first time we've seen that on this list. It's by M.G. Leonard and Sam Sedgman. Came out originally in 2020. I cannot remember if that was the American or the UK pub date, so I could be off there. It is deemed a contemporary mystery, and the main characters is yet another duo that seems to be a trend itself, which of course makes sense with the history of the mystery genre in general. And they are Hale and Lenny. Now, apparently in this mystery, the princess's diamond necklace is stolen while on the train, and the 2 of these 2 kids have to figure out what happened. I'm really looking forward to it. The setting is really lovely. The description of the train, the various eccentric characters that Hale is meeting at the moment. So yeah, stay tuned on my thoughts. And finally, we've reached the 15th book I want to talk about today, and that is The Mystery of Locked Rooms by Lindsay Currie. You may recognize that name, because I certainly did, but I haven't read anything by her, so sorry, Lindsay. I have been meaning to read these titles, and they are Scritch Scratch and What Lives in the Woods. I'm really intrigued by this because those 2 titles, if you know anything about them, are more leaning towards horror and thriller. And this one that I'm about to talk about, this title, The Mystery of Locked Rooms, is a mystery through and through for obvious reasons. I will be interested to see if there's anything supernatural that finds its way in the plot, but it is a book that comes out on the 2nd of April 2024. I have the ARC, and I am just so buzzing to finally read this because I wasn't sure if I was going to be accepted or not, and when I was like, yes, I know what I'm going to be reading soon. I know I was just commenting on how many duos I've talked about in this video so far, but I'm rounding off the list with a threesome. Sarah, West, and Hannah are three friends who team up to find a hidden treasure in an abandoned 1950s funhouse. I feel like there's going to be some creepy elements in this book. It is giving me Goonies vibes because while they're not entering, you know, caves in a pirate ship, they are looking for treasure. And on top of that, the main character among the three, Sarah, she seems to be struggling financially with her family. They received a letter of foreclosure on their home. One of her parents is dealing with long-term illness, so keep that in mind before you pick this book up. I haven't read it myself, so I can't tell you how prevalent or how much it's discussed as far as Sarah's feelings about it, but Sarah needs this money, especially to stay in this area, to stay with her friends. At least that's my understanding of the plot. And so the three of them are looking for this treasure. So she really, really needs it. It's riding on it. And that's also what's giving me Goonie vibes. And there are challenges, there are codes to crack. But as they continue further into this funhouse, they're realizing that these challenges seem to be more and more personal, as if whoever planted them knew that these three characters were going to be entering the house. So there's a lot of mystery in that in itself. And I can't wait to read it. Thank you so much for getting to the end of this video. I hope that you found, at least in this list of 15, one or two books that you're really intrigued by. If you've read any of them, I would love to hear your own thoughts about them in the comments, your own recommendations, as I mentioned earlier in the video. And if you had fun, if you're really looking forward to me continuing this type of content, then maybe consider subscribing to the channel, ringing that bell so that you know every other time that content like this comes out on my channel. I'm trying to do more sit-down videos, more recommendations with lists that are featuring this type of content. So again, if you're interested, consider subscribing. Thanks everyone so much. I hope you have a great day, and I really do hope to see you in the next one. Bye!